name is Mark Rasdorf, or good afternoon, I should say, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Senior Associate Director in Intercultural Affairs at East Carolina University, where I oversee the work of the Dr. Jesse R. Peel LGBTQ Center here on campus. ECU has a student population of over 30,000, and we are the largest LGBTQ center in the UNC system. I'm joined today by Mary Thorne, and Mary, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Mary Thorne. I'm the VP of IT Strategy and Transformation at Standard & Poor's, the Market Intelligence Division. I have been in software and Agile for over 10, 20 years. I was a past East Carolina grad like Mark. When I was there, we didn't have the Gay and Lesbian Center, which would have been awesome to have. Just super excited to have you guys here today.
So Mary and I have been invited by ezTagile to host this event or be part of this event as part of Pride Month in June. Every June around the country, communities celebrate Pride to commemorate the Stonewall riots in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn, when a few brave souls led by trans women of color threw the first bricks to try to end the police harassment which had plagued their lives and their social outings and gatherings for decades. And that was the beginning of this movement. So we honor their memories and their work, and we stand on their shoulders today in this discussion. I think we wanted to start with, for Mary and I to share a little bit about ourselves. So Mary, I'm gonna let you go first. How about that?
Thanks, Mark. When ezTagile, asked me to speak to you guys today, the first reaction I had was, I'm not sure I ever want to be the poster child of of this movement, or put my face on the movement. I sit back and I think, and Mark talking about the Stonewall riots, and think about all the history that got us here today, and I'm like, I've always been me, and so coming here, being here today, I've always been myself and been proud of who I am. And so I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia, very much a college town, very much like East Carolina, where Mark is at. I was obsessed with basketball, and I ended up getting a scholarship to play basketball at East Carolina. I was not gay then. I was through high school, I had a boyfriend, and he was great. Probably, it was a very, very close-knit town. Of course, when you go to college, you have your experiences, and I, at that point, realized that I was a lesbian. It was nothing earth-shattering for me. I didn't have a huge, it wasn't like a huge coming out. It was one of those experiences where, it's like you kiss a girl and you're like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense, right? Like that was my experience coming out. I was lucky to have lots of friends in college on my team that were also, gay, and so we had a little bit of a sorority there. When I left college, I look back now and I think about how lucky I was. My first job out of college was doing Y2K work at the Department of Transportation in downtown Raleigh. Now, for those of you, if any of you guys did Y2K work, I was a 22-year-old lesbian, smart, not very smart college, ex-player, and I ended up with the guys in the transportation division. We were working on COBOL applications, and they had all retired and been asked to come back. And my first reaction was, oh man, I don't know. I didn't even think about not being myself. Like I never even thought like, oh, I can't take my, and so I see these guys and I'm like, and they're like, what are you doing this weekend? And I'm like, can I say I'm going to play softball with my girlfriend? Like, and I never, it just hit me like when it like a brick, like, oh, and these guys are like 65, but they were such good guys. And I lied for the first, I don't know, six to 8 weeks working with these guys, and it just started to gnaw me. I was like, I don't think I can do this any longer. And one of the guys, older gentleman that took me in like his daughter, one day I finally said to him, and just a really good country boy, and he said, got a boyfriend? You know, because that's just what you talked about. And I said, no, but I have a girlfriend. And I would try to wait to see what his reaction was. And his reaction was, it wasn't a draw drop, but he definitely took a step back, you know, in it. And I said, you know, do you think that's going to be a problem? And, you know, he looked at me and he's like, you know, Mary, he's like, I'll be honest with you. That was a surprise. In the South, we didn't grow up around this here much. I really honestly don't have many gay friends or know of many people. I'm sure I do. He's like, I'm sure I do, but I don't know that. And he's like, just be yourself. And you know, it kind of changed my way of thinking. And it was kind of a defining conversation to me early in my career, is just be myself. And that's what I've done. So, you know, I left there, and you know, I was always myself. I was one of the guys, and I was very open about it. And from that time on, from the time I left there to um, you know, going to work at a company called PeopleClick for about 8 years doing software testing. Then I got into software test leadership, which was a great journey. And now just, you know, had my own company for a few years, which was a great experience. Um, it was a great experience until I have a wife. We've been together 21 years. We have two young kids. I have two kids with both with special needs. Both of them have ADHD, ODD, anxiety, and so just you know, it's sometimes not easy being a mom. And you know, the when the pandemic hit, she kind of looked at me and she said, if you get on another airplane, I don't know if we're going to work, well, you know, continue another 21 years. Kids are getting hard. It was hard being my, you know, being there as a single mom. And so, you know, perfect timing for me hit the pandemic. And what was great about it is I had been consulting at Standard and Poor's for the previous 2 years, and they had a role open up in their market intelligence division. Luckily, working with some ex friends of mine who had left a previous company that I worked at downtown. And when I came to Standard and Poor's and you know, got this, you know, the VP role, was the second time in my career I actually asked myself, can I be myself, right? And because it was at a grade level that was, you know, of seniority. And Standard and Poor's, you know, market intelligence division president Martina Chung is also open and has a wife and has a kid, and she was an inspiration to me to say if she can be the president of this company, I sure as heck can be a VP of and be myself and bring myself to work. And so it's just been a really a great journey at S&P, and I'm thankful for um, the what they have done as a company from a diversity and inclusion. As you can see behind me, this is some of the employee resource groups. They have a group called Spectrum, which is for you know, LGBTQ plus. They have a group called Valor, which is for ex-vets. Apex is for the Asian professionals. Bold is for the Black and African Americans. We have others as well, but these are the ones that I'm in, Spectrum and Valor. So just really lucky that I was given that advice from day one and through my careers to come to work, be yourself, and you know, just bring your whole self to work. And I've been lucky that way. Mark?
Sure. Thanks, Mary. So I'll share a little bit about my story. So I'm originally from Alexandria, Virginia. I came out as gay in 1982 in college in Richmond, Virginia at VCU as a theater major. And, you know, for me, the coming out process was a sense of elation, but then fear, because the AIDS epidemic was raging horribly in the 80s. So, and I got a degree in theater, and I worked in the performing arts and PR, marketing, management for 23 years. And so I was blessed, as we were talking about this session and workplace inclusion, I shared that I was blessed working in the arts, not to be stereotypical, but even amidst the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s, it was still a very safe place to be out, and where I never thought twice about editing any parts of my life. And I did that for 23 years. And then I got my wish to I lived out in Arizona, and I lived in outside of New York City for a year. And I was doing the arts in New York, outside of New York City at SUNY Purchase when the economy crashed. And so it was a very thankless job to try to market the arts when everyone's net worth was being cut in half. So I survived that. And then I went back to Tucson to recuperate from living in New York. And that was, Obama had just been elected as our first person of color in the White House, which gave me great hope. And I really wanted to change everything. So after a lot of soul searching, I decided to go back to graduate school, and I got a degree in counseling from Appalachian State University in Boone. And it was there that I started doing this work and serving LGBT population on college campuses. And what started that for me was actually organizing a candlelight vigil on campus at App in the fall of 2020 in response to the suicide of about 7 gay youth all over the country. And it was that moment with the mayor of Boone holding candles with us at a vigil and the dean of students at Appalachian State that I realized this is what I wanted to do. And I think it helped me check some of my own misperceptions that I thought it was so much easier for folks to come out now than when I was 19. And what I realized was that it was just different. And this work, I feel like for me, the arts came from my heart, and this work comes from a place in my soul. And we serve mostly students, but really we serve faculty, staff, alumni, prospective students and their family. And what I've learned living in Eastern North Carolina, I'd been at the beach many, many, many times over the decades in Emerald Isle, but living here was a very different experience. It's by far the most conservative place I've ever lived. And yet I have had experienced nothing but support and success. And I say that to say that my learning curve here was that east of 95 in North Carolina, there's very little organized support for the LGBTQ community. So ECU sees itself as an agent of regional transformation here in the East. And I have assumed some of that charge in the work here, starting to serve K-12 educators with trainings as well, because the reality is no school system in the East is going to take on offering an LGBTQ sensitivity training to their teachers and administrators. But if ECU does it, then we carry the load and we carry the burden, and we also help change our region. And we've done 3 of those trainings. They got interrupted by COVID, but already about 120 educators have gone through our training.
No.
And they loved it. Somebody's dog or kid was just into something. You know, and we do, our work is part of intercultural affairs at ECU, which looks at intersectional social justice. So I work in partnership with the Women and Gender Office, our Ladonia Wright Cultural Center, and our Center for Leadership and Civic Engagement. And we help educate our students on what intersectional social justice looks like, and also to try to serve their needs. But we also impact all of campus life, and the work we do helps in the recruitment of faculty and staff. And actually just yesterday, we got great news that an organization called Student Loan Hero, which is not related to any financial institution, did a study and analysis using the Campus Pride Index. And we were just rated the 12th most LGBTQ friendly, affordable college in the United States. So I'm very proud of that. And that's about decades of work. It's not just about this LGBTQ center. So that's our intro. And Mary, where are we going from here? To the,
you know, this conversation really, starts around courage, right? And what does it look like to bring your whole self to work, and to be, as a leader, right? We have to think about how we show up, right? How we show from, how vulnerable we are. One of my favorite, Brene Brown, I mean, I don't think you can think about courage without, quoting some of her work, or even if you ever get a chance to watch her Netflix special, it is amazing. It's like an hour and a half, and you'll just laugh the whole entire time. But one of my favorite quotes that she has is, when we have the courage to walk our story and own it, we get to write the ending. And, when I think about, how you bring yourself to work, right? How you show up, I really want to think about how we walk into that story and how we own it. Um, and one of the things that was really interesting, I always wondered, you know, when I was at eye contact with Bob Galen, he brought in a company to do a disc assessment. And it was, I love these things like Myers-Briggs, DISC. I've done fire. I mean, at Deutsche Bank, we did fire stuff. So I'm like, it's all about personality. But what I liked about DISC is one of the things it showed is yourself at home and yourself at work. And what it did is it gave you measurements when you took the test. Like if you're up here, at work, and then you're down here from the home scores, then you're not being yourself at work, right? That your job is stressing you more than your natural self. And when I did my disc assessment, I was pretty much the same. And so that made me feel good that I was coming in every day, bringing my true self to work, not stretching myself for who I am, and owning it. Now I'll say I didn't have, coming through the ranks and getting into this role. There were times me bringing my true self had implications, right? Performance reviews, and maybe this is true. I have some ex-coworkers on the call. I have been said to be a bull in the china shop, or I was that very, I had an extreme bias for action, right? I was I was going to win the game. I was ex-athlete. I was going to win the game at all else. There might be some dead bodies left, when I went through it. And that it took a lot. It took a lot to sit there and look back at myself and have the courage to say, and be vulnerable to say, okay, what part of this feedback is accurate, and what part of this feedback can I learn from? And as I, went every time, and there was always a similar kind of feedback, I didn't let it get, I wouldn't let it get me down. I took the good parts, and I take the bad parts and try to improve myself. I also felt like maybe there was some, like I would see a man beside me acting the same way, and they would get the attaboy, right? Versus me saying it, it was like, you can't, it's like, you're a woman, you can't do that. And so, there is that, courage to continue to be yourself, right? And so, coming through and I would say I had an easier stance because I really never let it all like get me down. Where I've seen some women that I have mentored, I wouldn't say play the victim card, but I would say, they felt like that they are being not given the opportunities or not given the chances to do some of this more, to get higher up in the organizations. And when I would coach them and talk to them, one of the things I often talked to them about was, you know, how would you do it differently? How could you show courage? And I'll give you an example. I have a girl that I'm mentoring yesterday, and we meet every 2 weeks for 30 minutes. And she had a job she wanted to apply for. She was a grade 10, the job was a grade 13. And she said, Mary, should I apply for this job? And I said, I would never hold you back from applying. I said, because getting the feedback, going through the interview process, you're only going to learn. And I said, what is holding you back? And she said, I'm scared. I'm like, what are you scared of? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, are you scared of getting the job and then not feeling like you can do it? She's like, no, I can do it. And she got real brave. And I'm like, why are you not applying? Like, what is holding you back? And she's like, I'm just scared. And I'm like, okay, but what are you scared of? And she just was scared that I mean, she couldn't explain it more than and it came to, I don't have the courage to do it. And I'm like, really? I'm like, why, can we not, it's an experiment, right? It's an experiment, apply for the job. You're going to only get feedback and learn from it. And so it's just, I've seen women, I've seen even, LGBTQ, sometimes I've seen men, but more women and men, where they just are paralyzed about failure and not having the courage to take it's like if they don't check every bullet point on the job description, they're not going to apply. Right. Whereas men, they might check 3 of them, like, all right, I'm going to do it. Right. And so as we, as I've been trying in my position now, where I find myself is trying to lead by example, show the courage, show, change. I do a lot of transformation, and transformation starting with a why. Why are we doing this? What's the goal? How is this going to benefit? And then you pair that with culture. One of the things I'm really passionate about from a culture perspective, culture lies between the behaviors you're currently tolerating and the behaviors that you aspire to. And the difference between those is where your culture lives. And for all my companies I've worked with in the last 5 years, I've done culture shaping workshops to say, well, let's define those behaviors that we're tolerating, and let's define those behaviors we're aspiring to. And then let's look about how we as leaders can emulate those behaviors, even to the point where we might even put them into performance objectives. And courage and vulnerability is always in there. Because if we can't be our true selves, if we can't be courageous, if we can't be vulnerable, we can't lead through the change, then us as leaders aren't going to be successful. So, when we think about how we move forward in life, really think about, you know, Brené's quote, right? Right. When you have the courage to walk into your own story and own it, we will get, we get to write the ending. Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and I was thinking a lot about like the theme of today, and I wholeheartedly agree that, I mean, each one of us on this call in some ways has probably had to draw upon some aspect of ourselves to show up in a courageous way. And I think too about with it being Pride Month, and the workplace is diverse, and why are some companies successful in creating and supporting diverse workplaces and workforces, and they realize that a diverse workforce makes the whole company successful. And I think about when I worked in the arts, I could be out, but I saw pressure. I was aware of pressure. Now, this is the 80s and 90s, and I think the AIDS epidemic, and honestly, Ellen DeGeneres coming out and her show being canceled because she came out, started to change things. But back then, I saw that actors were very cagey about identifying as LGBTQ because of stereotypes that, oh, well, he's gay, he can't play a straight man, or, oh, she's lesbian, she can't play a straight woman. And we won't even get into like trans identities, because we still have a lot of work to do as a society around trans and non-binary inclusion. But then I think about this work that I'm doing now, and for me as a gay man wanting to do this work, and when I got to an on-campus interview at ECU, I didn't know the institution very well. I knew, obviously, I was interviewing to run their LGBT, at the time, the LGBT resource office. But one of the things I wanted to make sure of, and I did this before I came to campus, was I read up on the university and I looked specifically for their non-discrimination statement. And what I needed, I got, which was their ECU's non-discrimination statement includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And I said, okay, as a starting point for me to go invest in a career change at 50 years old, and work with young people who are going to educate me, because I'm not an expert. I'm an expert on my life, but there's lots in the LGBTQ world that I'm still learning. But I needed to know that I was going to have the institutional support to do the work that I wanted to do. And for me, this work means meeting people where they are every day. And that means supporting faculty and staff and families and parents, because people come out at all different phases of life, and coming out is a lifelong process. And so, and honestly, we moved into a new building. That's when we became the largest LGBTQ center in the UNC system, due to a very generous gift from a retired psychiatrist who was originally from Eastern North Carolina. So we were at the table when this building was being designed. It's a 200,000 square foot building, and we have about 3,500 square feet. But one of the questions we went through was, where was this center going to be located? Was it going to be front and center, or were we going to be somewhere possibly with a little bit more safety to it, less visibility? And I got a little frustrated. The conversations went on for a while, but I got a little frustrated because I was like, I said, Jesse, if you're going to give a six-figure gift to ECU, why would we hide? Why, if we're going to have a vibrant LGBTQ center, why in the world would we be on a back alley? Like, let's do this work, let's show up, let's stand for our community. And in this idea of intersectional social justice, I, as a cisgender gay white man, I have a responsibility to own my privilege and recognize the doors it has opened for me, and where I can to work with my colleagues to understand their journey, and how might I support or use my privilege to support other people on this campus. And I feel like that touches some on this idea of LGBTQ in the workplace, and how do we create a diverse workforce? How do we support each other? How do we support our employees? How do we support someone doing a career change? And how do we support a young person coming in from ECU who wants to come in and like change your company? So that's my preamble to further discussion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important, especially for at least kids out of college, and then just, how do you bring your true self to work? Even if you're just coming out later in life, what Mark said, like, look at the companies. Do they have D&I programs? Do they have any type of employee resource groups? Like we have Spectrum. Look at their disclosures around sexual orientation. Make sure that they fill it. I find that with a lot of people, ESG or social governance is really coming right now. A lot of companies are starting that. You actually can start to see where companies are falling in their social governance over the next years as they're starting to create scores around that. And so it's really important if you're looking to transition jobs, and this is something important to you, is to look for when you're in the interview process those items.
And and if you're in a company and you see deficits in staffing or policy, each one of us, sometimes our work is inherently political in how we show up. But do you have the guts? Do you have the agency? Do you have the place to speak up and advocate for filling some of those deficits that you and your company may see? And I mean, yesterday, to get this email that we were ranked number 12 in the country for LGBTQ affordability and affordable was really a testament to the work of a lot of people, and the fact that ECU has not shied away from the work that we're doing in the center, which resonates across campus, and it can impact the visibility of this center, impacts new faculty who are looking at ECU. Because I think a lot of folks with a PhD are going to be aware of, Eastern Carolina is rural, historically conservative. And so what is it like to move across the country to invest, in a tenure track position to work here?
Yeah, and that's really important as we move forward. Are we ready to take it up for questions yet, Camille, or do you want us to keep talking? I can't remember if you said 12:35 or sorry, Alex or Maria.
We're good for questions now if you guys are ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. So Mary, I saw one that said, would like to learn about what companies are doing to promote, increase D&I in their interviewing and hiring practices.
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. I mean, there's so many things that we're doing at S&P. Like I said, we just last year, started we hired a head of chief of D&I. And so there are lots of things rolling out within my company right now. I can give you guys some examples on. First off is there are recruiting companies that actually specialize in hiring either, staffing Black women or LGBTQs or Asians, or, just that people are starting to realize that, trying to create that funnel. So we work with different type of recruiting companies. We have certain interview practices around making sure we have a diverse interview panel. First, people on the panel is diverse, and then trying to get a diverse set of candidates. That's an interestingly hard kind of thing. We don't want to look at people's names on resumes, and we try to filter out some of that stuff that would have any bias. So trying to always get the diverse candidates coming in, especially in technology. has been harder. Gosh, there's so much that we do. We do a lot of things with like Grace Hopper, which is a women's organization, all women's organization. I could just go on. There's a lot of things, but I'm fortunate that I have a company that really values that. And so, if you're in a company that, if you look, one way to kind of look at, does the company really value diversity? Look at the direct reports of the CEO, or look at their direct reports, and you can actually see if they've got, how they think about diversity, even at a leadership level. Mark, you probably work with some companies, as job, anything there you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting in terms of especially interviewing, I think, and most everyone on this call probably realizes this, that, I mean, the interview process itself, you've got to mind your P's and Q's in terms of employment law and human resources. But I think, what I know from years in higher ed is higher education loves a committee. So there's usually an interview committee, and I think the composition in the committee. So, like if I'm sitting on a committee, as soon as I say where I work, hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture of ECU's commitment. But, and I think, I don't know, in terms of diversity and inclusion in any company, if it's a company that's really behind it, then that's portrayed in its social media, in its website, that it's not hidden somewhere, that it's front and center, so that if you as a prospective employee are looking for that kind of thing, it's easy to find. And also you understand, I mean, I could rattle off a list of corporate entities that are very supportive of LGBTQ causes, largely because at big pride celebrations in the larger cities, their logos are plastered all over everything. And years ago, we wouldn't have seen that. Years ago, we wouldn't have seen Wells Fargo's name all over a pride parade, or, I mean, it's really changed a lot. And that, Target having the guts to take gender labeling off their clothing and children's clothing and toys led to a protest by the Million Moms. And, my take on that is good for Target. And if your kid wants a truck, buy them a truck. And if they want to run around in pink leggings, buy them pink leggings. You're going to do far more harm than, I was glad when Target put their values out there in terms of creating a diverse, both workplace and clientele in terms of who shops there.
Yeah. Maria, any more questions? Sorry guys, I can't see the chat questions because we're blocked.
Mary, I can see this one, and I don't know what this is about. So maybe you do, but then there's an explanation. Has anyone had any experience with the Rooney Rule for hiring, and specifically how it can help diversity and inclusion? And then the person states, the Rooney Rule is great in theory, but difficult for a lot of companies to execute because they can't get enough diverse candidates to fill the interview panel.
So I think I'm familiar with the Rooney Rule only because I think it was a football where in NFL they require Black coaches to at least one or two Black coaches go through the interview process. I have not had experience with that. Again, in our company, we obviously try a lot of times obfuscates the name, so we don't even look at name, to have any type of bias in the selections of the resumes. But I mean, I'm open to anybody in the panel, not on the panel, on the call, if they've had. I would love for you guys to help us answer that question. Has anybody had any experience with that? Do they have to take themselves off mute, or can they speak? Maria?
They can. So okay. If you want, open your microphone. I believe you can do it now.
Yeah.
And if you're having trouble, throw it in the chat. We'll get to it.
I mean, in technology too, it's just, really hard. There's, it is still a very white, Asian, that's what most of the candidates are. So it's really hard to find, African Americans specifically. There's just not many
Hey,
people.
Mary, it's Richard. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, Richard.
Hey, this is my question. And the company I work for is a really large multinational consulting firm. We've got over 300,000 people globally. And we have talked about trying to use the Rooney Rule as a way to increase diversity and inclusion. And the challenge we have is, by theory, each candidate that you interview, you have a panel that represents the broad spectrum of the candidates that you'd like to have in your workforce. And upon execution, not enough people are willing to come forward and volunteer, because then they get identified with a certain identity, and that can make some people uncomfortable. And so that was kind of where I was going with this question is, how can we within companies, with the intent of trying to increase diversity inclusion, support the people in our current workforce to feel comfortable enough to come forward and be able to participate as an identified person within the community. And obviously there'd be support at the top, so there'd be hopefully no repercussions negatively, but it's encouraging people to feel comfortable and confident enough to come forward and participate in activities like that.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to our topic, is the courage, right? It's like I said at the beginning, like, I don't know if I ever really, wanted to be on the front and center of a diversity workshop, right? That was never one of my inspirations. But I fit the bill, and I feel like I want to share my story and try to have the courage to do that. But with that said, when I've had people like that in the past, and I've asked them and they've given a reaction of kind of the same way I do, the first thing they always ask is, what's in it for me? And I'm like, well, how do you think that if you showed up and you actually, had the conversations or were part of the panel, do you think you could learn just as much from them as they could from you? So can you make a learning opportunity for you, right? That's what's in it for you. Can you actually be courageous and maybe be to bring more others like you on there? And so you're really trying to let them know, like, look, it's really about leading at that point, right? Show up as a leader. This is something that could really help, get you to your next, show, basically, emulate the behaviors that we want everybody to show as they move forward.
But I think too, Richard, it really depends on the cultural climate in an individual company. And if I had a lesson in this when I was in DC and I dated someone who wasn't in the arts, and it was my introduction to a whole group of gay white men, and I think this may still hold true, who had separate lives. Their professional lives were very separate from their personal life. And at work, they weren't out, they didn't talk about their personal lives. And what I saw is someone in their almost 30, and these guys were like mid 30s to 40s, when they got together, the immaturity was crazy. But what I realized was during the week, they were so buttoned down that when they could be themselves, it got a little loony. And so I think I work with this every day, that we teach our students who volunteer with us in the center to not assume anything about anyone's identity just because they're coming through our door, because I don't know how anyone identifies. I don't know how comfortable they are talking about it. And it's not my place to ask them. We're here to support everyone in this, in my workplace, but I also don't assume anything about anyone's identity. And I think, if you are interested in it and trying to encourage current employees to be involved and to show up in the fullness of who they are, if you're in a management position, you may need to put yourself out there in terms of, if it's inviting, I realize my work life has been either in the arts or in higher education, so it's a finite realm that I've worked in. But do you ever have guest speakers? Do you feature events or something that where if the management of the company can start to demonstrate somehow, whether it's guest speakers, events, their commitment, the company's commitment to a diverse, active, open, supportive workplace, then you might start to see people.
Mark, I 100% align to that. Over the last year with COVID and Black Lives Matter and everything, you know, our company has what they call bold, courageous conversations, and we have brought in some elite Black African-American speakers, however they decide to identify, and it's really increased our involvement in bold and bringing more diverse, people speaking out about diversity. And we did the same thing with Pride Month. We've had some, and this is from corporate, not from our divisions, but from corporate, these courageous conversations. And I think that's a really good point. I definitely saw a lot more, I don't know what the word is, courage from that community and wanting to step up and help.
Now, there is someone in the chat that would like to offer a dissenting opinion to this question. So
Sure.
if that person's ready to open their mic, they can do that, or you.
Hi, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit of a mess. Sorry. My name is Elizabeth Haste. I work with Willow Tree, and I guess dissenting was way too strong of a word because I actually don't disagree with any of this. Hi, I'm a little rough looking. I'm still in surgical recovery. Apologies. The question of how do I convince my employees to participate in this interview structure to have a more balanced composition of interviewers, I think, this is my opinion, but I think the premise is a little faulty in that the place that begins to be healed as an issue is by raising those individuals as leaders in your company first. What I've noticed from a lot of companies that have ERGs is that there is an expectation of free labor to bring in folks of those demographics, which they represent. So as a transgender woman, if I were asked, hey, could you be on our interview committee for so-and-so candidates? And this is already a little problematic. We noticed they're transgender and we need to put some representation in there, or for whatever reason, I would think, cool, so in addition to my job, you would also like me to do this new job and be the transgender person in the room. I have a lot more sympathy for the question of what's in it for me. I think if you want to get people to volunteer to do that thing, then the place to start is to give those folks a stake in the company, to train them up to be leaders. I'm not saying like dump a position on them or anything, but to give them that stake in the company and raise them up through the ranks so that you're not just grabbing someone because they're a person of color and throwing them into this interview situation. Show that you have the investment in them as an individual, and they may be more inclined to do what is essentially the extra labor that you're asking of them. So actually, I kind of agree with everything that you're saying. I just think you should come at it from a different perspective. I realize I said dissenting, and it probably sounded like I was going to say, I hate diversity, and that is that is not my contention. Thank you for listening to me. I'm done.
Thanks for summarizing that.
Thanks.
Being vulnerable and sharing.
Mark, is there any other questions on the
I
chat?
don't see anything there. I mean, the one thing too, I will say, and again, my workplaces have been not private sector for-profit entities for the most part, but I do think some of the lessons I've learned in this work can apply across other workplaces. And for example, at Appalachian State, there's a tradition started by Eve Ensler, the playwright who wrote the Vagina Monologues, that every February is V-Day, and the Vagina Monologues is done without royalties on college campuses across the country to have conversations fostered by that play about gender equity, misogyny, sexism, women's rights around the world. And it was hugely popular at App, and I came here to ECU and nobody was doing it. And I have background in theater, and it really bothered me on a campus that was almost twice as big as App. It wasn't being done here. So I went to my boss and I said, listen, can I do this? I mean, yes, I'm a gay white man, but I care about this work and I care about the messaging. And she said, sure, tackle it. And so for a couple of years, I fostered the production of the Vagina Monologues on campus, which the conversations we had, the young people, all women that were involved in the cast, people grew and we had incredible conversations on campus. And eventually when our Women and Gender office opened, they assumed the responsibility for that production. But the point being that I think for any of us, if we see a need that's not being met in a company, back to Mary's point and the topic of our chat, courage, have the guts to say, we need to be doing something about this. I may not identify with a group. Now, obviously, we don't want to speak up for other people, but we can advocate, and then that might open the doors for others to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, what I've seen over the last year is there's so much social activism happening that if your company is not addressing it at all, you might want to think about is, you know, if they're just putting a blind eye to it, they're not even thinking about hearing it, whether it's, you know, Black Lives Matter, if it's LGBTQ, you have to almost wonder, like, you know, what do they care about, you know, in that public space. And I appreciate the companies more that, you know, even if it was like, there was times where Supreme Court would enter something or there was some major decision made where our president would just email us and say, I just want to let you guys know the S&P does not agree with what that, you know, with what just happened. And it meant a lot. It wasn't a conversation. It was just an email from the CEO saying, we are sad and we, you know, that this has happened. And so, you know, if you find yourself not having any empathy from your senior leaders, you have to wonder about how the diversity and what they think about it, you know, in your company is.
Okay, Mary, we do have another question. I've been thinking about, and I'm using their quotes, the constructive use of privilege. What courage do you want to see from those with privilege to help make workplaces more inclusive?
I think it's showing up and being empathetic. I think it's being vulnerable. And I even like, you know, what we were talking about is help them, you know, what the lady from Willow Tree was saying, it's like help them become better leaders, try to get you, promote them, right? Try not promote them in a way of like mentor them, you know, trying to get them to being courageous, being confident, should be in their true selves to work. I don't know, Mark, if you want to add.
And I think too that, you know, depending on the environment and your work and how often you can do something like, but if you feel like, I mean, how often, if you're in a management position, if you're in a place of privilege, how often do you create opportunities to level the playing field and have really open and honest conversations to say, this is a safe space. I want to talk today about where you are and how we are doing as a company. Like, what can, you know, gender equity is still an issue in our country. The rate of pay, you know, I mean, that you, as a leader, do you have the guts to put that on the table?
I would even add to that, Mark, sorry to cut you off. I would say, even to add to that, at S&P, we have these employee research groups, and we have probably a meeting, I don't know, once a week or every 2 weeks where we have some guest speaker or something, right? To your point, you know, some of the managers do not encourage the ERGs. They think that's like, you're supposed to work your 40 hours, you know, and then do these things, right? And so, you know, if I'm privileged, I have told all of my employees that you need to make space for growth, for ERGs, whatever it is. Please participate. One of the guys on my team is the chapter head of Valor. He probably spends 20% of his time coordinating Valor events. He is a true culture carrier, though, right? And it's space and our culture and engagement scores. I mean, I think people know this, but you know, engagement scores, things like ERGs help, you know, increase engagement scores, which then at the end of the day increases, we know, company profit and happier customers. So, you know, just giving space to your team, I think is, and having these conversations, like you said, Mark.
Well, and we're at a 7-minute warning. We've got a 10-minute warning 3 minutes ago. So we're at 7 minutes. So if any of you have a burning question that you would either like to ask with your microphone or put in the chat, please do. But the one thing I was going to say, again, relative to Pride Month and this conversation and Mary and I being here, this month, if you haven't already done it, if you have a space, put up something rainbow and show up in your workplace this month to show you support the LGBTQ community. And I'm dead serious when I say this. I don't hardly know anybody on this call, but we have tons of free LGBT swag at the LGBTQ Center at ECU. Send me your address, I'll send you some stickers. Because I'm telling you, one sticker on your door or in your office can help that employee. To the conversation earlier about the Rooney and Richard, some of your comments, somebody coming into your office and seeing something like that might be, oh, wow. It can be a game changer. It seems super small, but it can really be a game changer. So I will put my money where my mouth is. If you need some stuff, send me your address. I'll put it in the mail for you. Any other? Go ahead, Mary.
I would just add to that, it takes a lot of vulnerability as a leader to do that, right? And courage is about vulnerability, right? And so, another Brene Brown quote I have on my desk is, vulnerability is not about winning or losing, because I'm a sports freak, but it's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. And so, and even like I have my shirt today, right? I'm showing up, right? And I have a choose kindness rainbow in my, you can't see it because I have the background in my office, but I'm right there with you, Mark. It really matters.
And so someone, just following up on our conversation, someone wrote, also keeping books on your desk that address issues. I think that can help. And a rainbow sticker on my manager's laptop gave me the reassurance on my first day that it was safe to be out. It's a huge deal. I don't know, and Maria, you don't need to answer this, or Camille, but I don't know if this is all a North Carolina audience or if we're pulling from all over the country or the world. We live in a global society now, so maybe we are. I hope so. But we're starting a new campaign, and I was looking at my desk to see if I have a copy of it. But that just has the all means all with the rainbow sticker. And it's going to be a t-shirt campaign for campus in the fall. So, and I'll tell you, a breakthrough for me, before that, there was another t-shirt that we did for years called, it said "Gay Fine by Me." And we had it in all 6 colors of the rainbow, and we would do a human rainbow photo. And one year we had this fantastic photo in front of these new ECU letters in front of our building. And I'm like, God bless America. I want that on the ECU's homepage. Like all these other events get on the homepage. And I'm like, it's time. We need that on the homepage. And we got it. I was like, finally. So that mattered to me. That like, finally, I can see other diverse events represented on ECU's homepage, but do they have the guts to put an LGBTQ event on the homepage where everybody can see it? And there's going to be alumni who are going to send hate mail and threaten to stop donating, but they did it, and I was really happy.
Yeah, and we are just 4 minutes before we end the session, and I just want to wrap up and say that we love the candor of the conversations, your questions, your comments, and the great feedback that we receive, and to make this space safe for everyone. So we hope you found this conversation helpful to you. I'll make sure to pass Mark emails if you want to receive stickers and other things about the LGBTQ, so you can also show the love. So thank you again. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoy your weekend, and see you next month in our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks for joining us, guys.
All of you. And here's the sticker. I'll send you one if you want one.